Introduction. Hello. Today I'm writing an expert advisor based on a comment that I received recently, and the comment was to combine RSI Overbought Oversold levels with a moving average cross. So I'll explain the strategy in a moment. This video is for MetaTrader 4. I have a separate video for MetaTrader 5, and I'll leave a link in the description, and if I can remember, I'll leave a card at the top of the screen pointing you to that video. The expert advisor that I'm going to write will be based on my standard default moving average cross expert advisor, which I use many times as the basis for these kind of simple experts. I will be making some small changes to the MA Cross expert advisor that are different to earlier versions I've had. If you want to see the earlier versions, I'll leave a link in the video where you can find the first version of that. Otherwise, I'm going to be describing it in total here. And if you've already seen the earlier video, then I will leave chapter marks so that you can skip over that if you want to. The code is very similar for MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5. So at times I will be simply cutting and pasting in the video from one to the other. And so you may see some continuity errors where I do that. Just ignore any code around the function where I'm making the discussion and just concentrate on the code that I'm talking about. And that way it will only be relevant to the MetaTrader 4 or 5 video. But as I said, I have copied some parts of the video from the MetaTrader 4 to the 5 or from the 5 to the 4. So let me first go out and describe the strategy to you, and then I'll move on and show the moving average cross, which is the basis for the strategy that I'm writing, and then we'll make the updates to that to create the RSI MA Cross combined strategy. All right, I have the MetaTrader charts open here. I've got the EURUSD. I'll just change that to a 15-minute chart. The strategy uses an RSI, a 10-period RSI, with levels at 80 for overbought and 15 for oversold. It then uses a 5-period exponential moving average, which I've colored here in yellow, and a 10-period moving average colored in blue. The strategy itself says to wait for the RSI to be overbought, which is here above 80, and if there is a downward cross of the moving average, which means the fast moving average becomes below the slow moving average, or the 5-period becomes below the 10, then sell. And if the RSI, as in here, is oversold, then buy if the moving average crosses above. So if the 5-period becomes above the 10-period. When I built this and ran some tests over a 2-year period, I got no trades at all. So I'm actually going to be testing this with the RSI levels set at 50 and 50. I know it's not exactly what the strategy says, but in order to show it in the demonstration, that's what I'll be doing. But I will be writing the code with the default values of 80 and 15 for the RSI overbought and oversold. The strategy didn't specify any exit criteria. So I've chosen as an exit criteria, and let's just get rid of the RSI for the moment. So if we just look at the moving average cross, for example, there's a cross here. I am setting the stop loss at the recent swing low, which would be there, and then the take profit is a 1-to-1 ratio of that stop loss to the market entry point. And the market entry point, because I'm waiting for the cross, I would be entering at this point at the top of that bar. So I would have a stop loss down to here and a 1-to-1 take profit. To find the stop loss, I'm using a standard function, which we'll see in a moment when I go to the standard functions. And then for a sell signal, we find a sell. Here's a good one, where the fast moving average crossed below the slow. I would have picked that up at this point at the close of that bar. So the stop loss there would have been at this swing high. I know there's a break there, but that's further back than I'm looking. So I would have set my stop loss there and a 1-to-1 take profit. Fairly simple, but there was no exit criteria specified with the request. Although, as I've said, the actual expert or the criteria for this didn't make any trades over a 2-year period, you can still take this code and adapt it with values of your own and use it as an example of combining these two indicator sets. So now let's go into the moving average cross and just show that as the default basis And once I've done that, I'll then move on to the RSI moving average cross and show how I changed the default moving average cross expert into the RSI moving average expert. This is the MetaTrader 4 editor now. I'm looking at the moving average cross, the basic moving average cross. I have my experts folder, inside that Orchard, inside that MA Cross, and then the MA Cross.mq4. I've already written this, so I'm just going to be walking through and explaining what's in here because I've explained it in many other videos before, but there are some slight differences. This is a newer version. To begin, the standard comments, property strict, which is only needed for MetaTrader 4, but if you do include this in the MetaTrader 5, it's harmless, it's ignored. And this simply indicates that we should be using the newer compiler syntax, which I always use. Then I've just defined an app name and an app magic because they're used in the inputs later. The properties, copyright, link, version, and description, all standard things. This is, that actually should be just standard moving average cross. That's a comment left over from an earlier video. Scroll this down, and now there are inputs, and these inputs for the moving average, for the fast moving average, I have some standard inputs that I have for that, and I generally have a naming convention like this: INP fast MA period. So this is a 20 period moving average method. Default is for EMA, and the applied price is to apply the closing price. Now this block for the fast MA, you'll see, is almost the same as for the slow MA. There are just some differences in the values and in the names of the variables. I use these blocks of code, fast MA and slow MA and a number of others, so often that I actually already have them stored in a separate file of code snippets, and I just copy them into my new applications as I write them, and then just change these values as I need them. So that's just a potential programming tip for you. If you are writing a lot of expert advisors or indicators, you might find there are certain blocks of code that you reuse. And in this case, I could have created these as include files, but quite often I will be changing the names here, and because I am changing the values, it's just easier to copy these into my code. My default stop loss take profit for this particular expert is a fixed number of pips, so stop loss pips at 50 and profit pips at 50. As I say, this is just for demonstration and as a basis starting expert advisor. And then the standard inputs, I default to 0.01 for these tutorials in an order size, and there's the app magic and the app name from above in the magic number and the trade comment. So moving on to some buffers and global values. This is MetaTrader 4, and so I could capture each of the values one by one, but I choose to set these up as arrays. So I have a fast moving average array and a slow moving average array. I do that because it makes it a little easier to be compatible with MetaTrader 5 code, and because I write so much for both 4 and 5, it's just easier for me to do this. And I'm going to require 3 buffer values. So when I actually fill these with values at each tick, I'm going to be looking for the most recent 3 values, or rather 3 values beginning from 0. So I'll be getting values back for bars numbers 0, 1, and 2. The stop loss and take profit inputs were in pips. I'm going to convert those to actual double values, and so I have 2 global variables to store those converted results. In on-init then, I'm converting the stop loss and take profit using functions called pips to double, and I'll move down to those in a moment. On the input stop loss pips and input take profit pips. I call the isNewBar function once because that isNewBar will detect when a new bar has been created, and by calling it once here in onInit, then it won't detect the starting bar as a new bar. So you may start a 4-hour bar and be 3 hours in. You don't really want to detect that as a new bar. So just calling this function once here will basically reset that, and I won't get a new bar until the next new bar begins while this expert is running. Now, specific to MT4, I have this array resize buffer fast MA and slow MA to the values required. They were declared as dynamic arrays, and I just want to set them up one time only to be as large as I'm going to need them. For MetaTrader 4, nothing in OnD init. Now in the onTick event handler, there's a Boolean value for new bar, condition open buy, and condition open sell. So new bar is just getting this is new bar function. We'll see that function in a moment. Condition open buy and open sell, I'm just defaulting those to false to begin with. And then if not new bar, return, because this particular strategy only opens trades on a new bar and they are closed automatically by the take profit and stop loss. So there's nothing to do unless we have a new bar that's just formed. There's another custom function, fill buffers. We'll get to all of these custom functions in a moment, but fill buffers will simply get all of the values up to the number of values required into the buy and sell buffers. And then I'm performing a comparison to see if the fast has crossed above or below the slow. And to do that, I use the cross up function for the buy and cross down function for the sell. These are also custom functions. And cross up will compare the values in the fast moving average buffer with the slow moving average buffer for bar number 1 to see if the fast has crossed above the slow. And cross down will just do the opposite, see if the fast has crossed below the slow. So then if I have the open buy condition set, I'm calling this function trade open SLTP gap. So it's kind of a specific function name, and that is because the functions that I include here, I typically maintain them in a separate library. All of these custom functions I'm talking about are in a separate function library that I include typically in the code when I'm beginning to write. And then for the purpose of showing these demonstrations, I copy those functions back into the Expert Advisor to make it easier to show. But because I have so many functions in this standard library, I need to differentiate them with something in the name. So I can't just call this trade open because I have other trade opens that just happen to have the same signature of values. So I can't just rely on overloading the function. So the trade open stop loss take profit gap takes an order type, buy in this case, the size, trade comment and the magic number, the stop loss gap and the take profit gap. And then the condition sell is just the opposite. It takes the order type sell and the rest of the values are the same. Now going down to the custom functions, let's start with points to double. So points to double takes a value of number of points and simply multiplies that number of points by the size of a point. This point is an inbuilt function and gives me the decimal size of a single point for the current symbol. So points multiplied by point gives me the result for points to double as a double. When I'm calling pips to double to convert that stop loss and take profit pips into a double value, I'm passing in the number of pips and I'm returning points to double of the value pips to points. Pips to points is this function, takes the number of pips and returns the number of pips multiplied by. Now, if the current chart symbol digits function is 3 or digits is 5, so if the number of digits for the quoted symbol is 3 or 5, then I'm going to multiply this number of pips by 10. And if it's not 3 or 5, then I'll multiply by 1. And that simply tells me how many pips I have. So, and that simply tells me how many points I have. So pips to points will convert the number of pips into points, and then points to double will convert that value to a double. Here is the isNewBar function. It has this static date time previous time equals 0. Now if you're not familiar with it, static variables receive this default value the first time the function's called, and after that they retain the value they had from the previous call to the function. So I'm initializing this to 0, and that's why I make that single call from the onInit function to simply flush this out, and you'll see as the rest of the code goes. Then I have a date time of current time, and that is equal to I time for the symbol period bar number 0. So that gives me the start time for the current bar. And then a comparison. If the previous time is not the same as the start time for the current bar, then I must have a new bar. I set the previous time to that current bar start time and return true. If I get to this point, then the previous time is the same as the current time, and so I can just return false. So that's the isNewBar function. Now the cross up and cross down functions. They take the same arguments. There's an array, which is the fast moving average in this case, and a second array, the slow moving average, and an index, which is the bar number that I want to compare. There is an optional argument here, index 2, which is defaulted to -1, and I haven't used it, so I'm getting the default. And that is in case I want to compare the value with this index with something other than the previous bar. So I can set that to a bar number, and it will compare the value for this bar with the value for that bar. If index 2 has come in at the default -1, so I have this statement, if index 2 is less than 0, then I simply set index 2 equal to index 1 plus 1. So the default is to compare to the previous bar. And then across is equal to array 1, index 1 is greater than array 2, index 1, and not array 1, index 2 is greater than array 2, index 2. And then I simply return cross. Now the cross down is the same test here for index 2, but I've just reversed the greater than and less than signs in this cross line, and then I just return cross. These functions are specific to MetaTrader 4, so the functions above are common. These will be specific to MetaTrader 4 simply because of the way MetaTrader 4 works. The fill buffers function takes a single value, which is the number of values that I require, and I'm always beginning at 0 in this particular function. And then I simply loop for int I equals 0 while I is less than the number of values required, I++. And in MetaTrader 4, I can't retrieve an array of values from an indicator. I have to return values one by one. So buffer fast MA I, which is the loop variable, equals the IMA function, symbol period, fast moving average period, 0 for shift, fast moving average method, fast moving average applied price, and I, which is the bar number that I want the value for. And the slow MA, same thing, but I'm using the slow values from the inputs. So that will populate an array that is the size of values required with these IMA functions, or the values from the IMA functions, and then just returns true. To the trade open SLTP gap, the arguments here, the type, the volume, trade comment, magic number, stop loss in value away from the price, and take profit gap to the price. I have some working variables here, the price with the open price for the trade, close price with close price. SL is the stop loss price. What I'm calling SL gap here is based on the closest value that I can have the stop loss or the take profit to the current price. I can get that gap with symbol trade stops level using symbol info integer. So that returns the number of points away that the stop loss or the take profit must be from the current price. I'm just casting it to an int there because it comes back as a long, and then I'm calling the points to double function to convert that value to a double. And TP is going to be the take profit price. If the stop loss that I've passed in is greater than 0 and the stop loss is less than that minimum gap, then return, because I simply can't place that stop loss. It will just generate an error, so I just return at that point. And then I do the same for the take profit, because the gap is the same thing that applies to the take profit. So if take profit is greater than 0 and take profit is less than the SL gap, return. And the reason I allow 0 is that it is possible to simply set a stop loss and take profit as 0, which I do a little later in the code. Then I make this call to refresh rates. It's always a good idea to make sure you get the most recent rates value, just in case the code before has taken some time. This expert advisor is very fast, and that's not a problem, but as a standard, I include that. So if then this is an order type buy, I'm using symbol info double for the ask to get the opening price and for the bid for the closing price. And then if stop loss specified is greater than 0, the stop loss price will be equal to the closing price minus the stop loss. Remember that the initialization for stop loss was 0. So if stop loss passed in is 0, then stop loss price is still going to be 0. And the same for take profit. If that's greater than 0, then the take profit equals the price plus the take profit. So stop loss is based on the close price, and take profit is based on the opening price plus take profit. And the else statement here, this is for order type sell. I'm simply reversing bid and ask for the open and close price, and I'm reversing these signs for the stop loss and take profit. So close price plus stop loss and price minus take profit. I call normalized double on all three of those just to make sure that I have valid values using the digits function, which gives me the number of digits for this symbol. And then I call order send symbol type, that should be volume, and that should be trade comment, using the values that were passed in, and this should be magic. There. Trying to use the values passed into the function. Now order send returns a ticket number, which should be greater than 0. If it returns a ticket number of 0, then this not will say I've failed that, and then I just print the error message. And that's everything in the simple moving average cross for MetaTrader 4. So now let's move on and see how I modify that for the RSI MA Cross. Now I'm in the MetaTrader 4 editor, but as I mentioned earlier, as we go through this, you may see pieces where in the editor I've cut in some sections I recorded from MT5, just because it's easier for me to do that one time only. I've already copied all of the code from the MA Cross into the RSI MA Cross custom and changed the comments here. And I've also added in the trading rules. They're fairly simple. So the rules were buy when the RSI is oversold and the EMA 5 crosses above the EMA 10, sell when the RSI is overbought, greater than 80, and EMA 5 crosses below the EMA 10. I might have mentioned at the beginning that the request that I received didn't include any exit criteria, so I'm adding a stop loss for the buy trades at the nearest swing low based on a 5-period fractal, meaning I'm looking for the lowest low for 5 periods. And the buy take profit will then be at a 1-to-1 ratio for that stop loss. The sell stop will just be at the nearest swing high, and this take profit again at 1-to-1. Properties are the same as they were before, and then we're down to inputs. So I still need the fast and the slow MA inputs, but I'm changing these default values to 5 and 10 as according to the strategy. And they're both still EMA and closing price. Now I need to add in the RSI values. Now something else I may have mentioned earlier is that I tend to keep these little input blocks in a separate file ready to copy and paste in here because I do them so often. So I already have the standard inputs for an RSI. So I'll just paste those in here. So it's just got the RSI period, the applied price, overbought and oversold levels. I've already filled in the defaults there, 80 and 15 for the overbought and oversold, and the period is 10. The stop loss and take profit, I'm replacing these stop loss and take profit pips with the swing high and swing low number of bars, and then with the take profit ratio. So I'll just delete these two. So I have this swing period that's just defaulting to a 5, that's 5 bars, highest and lowest. And the take profit ratio is 1-to-1. No change for the basic inputs. I do need to add a buffer for the RSI. And I'm still using buffers for values required as 3. I'll mention this a little later in the MT4 code where this is slightly inefficient for the RSI, but I'll explain why I'm doing that. I don't need the global values for the stop loss and take profit now, so I can just delete that. I also don't then need to set the stop loss and take profit pips, so I can delete that. I still need to reset the new bar, and I need to add an array resize now for the RSI, so I'll just copy one of those, change that to buffer RSI. That's all the changes for on init. No changes to on dinit. Let's look at on tick. I will be modifying the fill buffers to add the RSI in there, so I don't need to change this line. The condition open buy and open sell will change though, because I now have an additional condition. So I still have the cross up condition, but I'm adding for the condition open buy that the buffer RSI bar number 1 is less than the oversold level. And then for the open sell, I've got cross down again, but now its buffer RSI 1 is greater than the overbought level. Then if condition open buy, I actually need to calculate that stop loss price, and I need to call a different function. So I'm going to just replace those. So the swing low, that's another function that I'm going to write in a moment. I'll show that to you. But it just takes a starting point, which is bar number 0, the swing period that was part of the inputs, and then it returns a value. It returns the bar number as the result of this function, but it also updates this stop loss price with the value that it retrieves for that bar. Actually, I need to put in a variable for that stop loss price. So I just default the stop loss price to 0 here, and it will be filled in by this function. And this is obviously a different name function, take open SL price TP ratio. So this one I'm passing in a stop loss price and a take profit ratio. So the only difference is from the earlier function, I'm just adding that stop loss price here, and this value is then the ratio. I need to make the same changes for the sell. But in this case, I'm calling the swing high function, and I'll also show that in a moment. All of these functions, pips to double, pips to points, is new bar, cross up, cross down, no change there. I'll paste in the functions for swing high and swing low. I said I keep them in a separate library. I've got that, and I'll just paste it now. So swing high takes that start bar number, the look back, which in my case is defaulting at 5, and it returns a value as int, which is the bar number that was found, and also returns the value of that bar for the this is the swing high, so it will return the high value for that bar. And you might have seen this function before. I define high bar and make that equal to start, and then I use a do statement. While I set the start equal to the high bar, which on the first iteration through has no effect, but it does change later. And then the high bar is set by using the iHighest function for the symbol, chart period using mode high because I'm doing the swing high here, for the look back beginning at bar number start. And this do loop then repeats while the high bar is not equal to the start bar. So if this has changed the value of high bar, then that's going to be true, so it will loop back and start again, and simply moves the start bar across and keeps looking for a new high bar until it finds the highest high for this number of bars. Once it's done that, I just set value equal to the iHigh value for the symbol period and that high bar, and then return the high bar. Swing low is the same arguments, but here I just use low bar, and I'm looking at iLowest and mode low, and then getting the iLow value. In fill buffers, there's no change to these two lines, but I need to add the RSI line in. And this is the same as the other two. I'm just calling the iRSI function here, symbol period, RSI applied price, looping through. Now here's where I said it's a little bit inefficient. For the RSI, if you looked at the tests I used above, I only use one value from that, but I'm returning 3. Now 3 is not a big number. It's not very inefficient. I could get by with just calling this for 1. If this were some kind of custom function though, it might be very inefficient to call it multiple times when I don't need all of those values. I'm going to leave it here because it simply is not a big issue for this expert advisor, but it's something you might want to know for later. And in doing this, I'm just following a standard approach, which is easy to write and it gets the job done quickly, and it meets with my principles of two-step development process, make it work, make it better. So this will make it work. If I find that I've got a performance problem, I can then come back and make it better. And now the trade open SLTP gap, I've obviously replaced that. So there are quite a number of changes, but a lot of similarities as well. So I might just edit this in place. So this is the trade open SL price TP ratio. Still has type, volume, trade comment, and magic. They don't change. And then a stop loss price, which is defaulting to 0 in case you don't want a stop loss, and a take profit ratio, which also defaults to 0 in case you don't want to take profit. If the stop loss price is less than or equal to 0, then return. That should just be if it's less than 0, then return, because you can't have a stop loss price less than 0. In the earlier version I called that SL gap, but I think I'm going to change that to a different variable. So I'll call it stops level, which is more in tune with this stops level. I don't have these same tests here for stop loss and take profit because I'm actually receiving a stop loss price, so I need to calculate how far that is away. I'll just take those two lines out. Still leave the refresh rates. I'm still capturing a price and a close price. I'll remove these two lines because I've already got the stop loss price calculated. In fact, up here I should have made this SL equals stop loss price. Yes, capture that in the definitions there. Now here I'm saying if the stop loss price is greater than, I should also have if stop loss price greater than 0 and the stop loss price is greater than the close price minus the stops level. So I've had an actual price passed in here instead of a distance, and if that is above close minus stops level, which is as close as I can get the price to that close price, then I return because it's an invalid stop loss price. Stop loss price equal to 0 is valid because it just means I won't have a stop loss. And then the same down here on the sell side, I can replace that. I'll just take a copy of this line. But in this case, it is close price plus the stops level. There. So if stop loss price is greater than 0 and stop loss price is greater than close price plus the stops level. That should be less than as well. There. Stop loss price less than close price plus stops level. I need to calculate the take profit value. And this calculation is the same whether I'm using a buy or a sell. So if the take profit ratio is greater than 0, then the take profit price equals price plus, and price is the open price, plus the open price minus the stop loss price. So that's actually the gap between the price and the stop loss. And that same formula works whether it's a buy or a sell. And take profit ratio, if it's equal to 0, means I don't have a take profit, so it will just retain this default value of 0. Just as before, I use normalized double just in case. And then the order send is the same because I'm just passing in values to order send, and I've already calculated those, and then the print. And that's the end of the MT4 specific code. In fact, that's the end of all of the code for the RSI MA Cross custom. I will run a demonstration on this to show you what happens, but as I mentioned, I think I mentioned at the beginning, when I first tested this using the default values, I got no trades at all. So I'm going to be editing in the strategy tester this value for the RSI, these values for the RSI, the overbought and oversold, so that I can actually get trades made. That doesn't mean that these are necessarily invalid. Maybe there are other changes you want to make this run. This is just as it was specified to me. I will also be running the demonstration on MetaTrader 5 simply because I'm just going to run the one demonstration, and I'll copy that in the editor between the two versions, and the results are the same. So I have MetaTrader 5 here. I have already loaded the expert into the strategy tester, and as I mentioned sometime earlier, when I ran this initially using the default overbought and oversold according to the strategy over a 2-year period, I got no trades. So just for this demonstration, I've changed those both to 50. So if it's overbought at 50 or oversold at 50, then as soon as we get across, we will trade on that. I'm just going to run this through and just step it to the first couple of trades so that you can see them. There's no point in showing the result for this, especially since I've changed these parameters so drastically. But I just want to show that it will set those trades with the take profit and stop loss as expected. So here we can see it's placed a buy trade. And if we move to the left, I can see the take profit at 199 and the stop loss at minus 199. So I'd set those equally. And I can see that the stop loss is based on a low point for this bar. Now it might look like it should have been here, but so the 5 bars that I'm looking at include the bar where it has found that low, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bars. It is still the lowest bar up to here. So I could have increased that 5 bars, made it 10 maybe if you want to be a little bit more accurate, but that's where it's set the low point for this swing low. So that's the stop loss, and then it will move. And of course the take profit is a ratio 1 to 1 from that. I'll let it run now until I get to a sell trade just to see what happens there. Just shrink that a little to get the numbers away. So I now have a sell trade, and I can see it has a stop loss at minus 181. That is at this swing high. And the take profit at 181 is a 1 to 1 ratio from that. So I'm not going to, as I said, show you a complete run of this because I'm just trying to show how it places the trades, and there's no point in showing a profit result from this given that I've changed the input parameters so much. But that is my explanation of showing adding an additional indicator in there, matching them up, and the code that you need to go through to maybe convert that standard moving average cross into something else. I mentioned earlier there will be a link to earlier videos that also describe the moving average cross, but I have changed it a little with this version. The moving average cross code and the code for the RSI moving average cross will be available for download. If you follow the link in the description to our website, you'll find a link then to download the code for that. And that will be for both MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5, 2 different downloads. So I hope this has been useful to you. If it has, then click that like button. And if you want to see more of our videos, click subscribe and click the bell icon to get notifications when we release new videos. Until next time, thank you for watching.